let's start on with the table. So these are going to start a little bit older since like um since the me and Annie are swapping back and forth, so sometimes I have a few older pictures that I throw back in. So April found herself some beautiful black morels here. This was out in West Virginia. I'm not sure if she's moved there, if she was out hunting out there, but she said she's found more out there than all of her years hunting in Maryland. So anyway, this is Morchella angusticeps, your black morel. You can see this one's getting a little bit older, but this one's just beautiful. I like her little posed pictures too. Lucas Minich found this at Lake Needwood in some mulch. Um, Little tough to tell from this picture, but knowing it's the spring, look at the habitat, it's growing in mulch, and you got a key from, or clue from this mushroom right here. It's like, oh, this looks like that has some little purplish spores. These are a bit brown, but some of the other ones had this reddish coloration on them. These are your King Stropharia. You can see they've got these purplish gills. This is from the spores maturing. Um, and as they get their species epitaph, rugoso annulata. So rugose is kind of rough, and the annulus is the ring. And so it's got this rough ring on the stipe there. Often much redder than this when they're out of the sun and just emerging. The sun can bleach them to that brown color really quick. These can be quite tasty, especially when you get them nice and fresh. Roberta Gartside found this at Turkey Run. This was in the spring as well. Sure, a lot of you guys probably know what that is. This one has much bigger scales than you often find them. But you can see on the underside here, you've got some pores beginning. And it's got a couple of friends in there. It's very young and fresh. This is your dryad saddle. This is pretty common when you're hunting morels. You might see this growing on some logs or a wound in a tree. If you ever see this one, so when it gets a little bit older, it'll start getting a very black foot. Um, and it gets to be tough. This isn't edible. Some people say it's not the best, but if you do see this one, slice off an edge and give it a whiff. I like sniffing lots of mushrooms, and so this one has an interesting smell. I think it kind of smells like watermelon rind. Some people say cucumber and stuff like that, but to me, it's very distinct. And the next one is kind of cool because if you guys were around on one of Annie's talks, she kind of covered this mushroom in detail. This is, I believe it's Polyporus phagicola, or it might be Brasidolia craterella. I'm not sure. I looked on the species Fungorum and it said this, and I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. But anyway, it's one of these. Looks kind of like Dryad Saddle. It's much paler. I believe, was this the one that has the less hexagonal pores, Annie, or was it the other one? You had talked about it, but anyway, it's got pores running all the way down the stipe, right to the wood. It tends to be smaller. And like I said, it's paler, but does have these scales. This is a totally different mushroom. Like if I would have found this before any talked about it, I would have thought it was like some pale dryad saddle or something, but actually it's different, totally different mushroom.
It is Polyporus phagicola in North America. We now know from sequencing.
Oh, cool. Thank you. All right, Maryland saw these guys. You can see like right outside the Saks Fifth Avenue. Um, so there was a little bit of an issue though. The park police were right there. It did look like oyster mushrooms. And she, I suppose, was like, well, this isn't a park. This is just a Saks Fifth Avenue on some ornamental tree. The damage she would do would be to the tree would be nothing. The damage she'd do to the mushrooms would be nothing. So these are our oysters. And so she went and filled up her basket and headed for home. All right. For some folks that might have been here for a little while, if you're brand new, take a look at this one. Hopefully some people that have been around for a little while, this kind of will throw up some warning signs. This kind of bold white cap here. Daniel found this near Rat Creek. But there were some other older specimens, and when he looked at the underside, say, oh, okay. So it looked kind of like an Amanita destroying angel, Amanita bisporigera. But looking at this, it's got this pink hue happening on the gills. This is the spores maturing. It'll eventually turn to brown color, just like your typical button mushrooms in the grocery store. Another thing to note is that the partial veil remnants they've got some all along the edge of the cap, as well as remnants on the stipe. I am not very good at agaricus, but it also has free gills. So I didn't want to put a species name on this one. If anybody feels like they might know what this is, feel free to chime in. But I just called it agaricus species because there's so many out there, and I'm not the best at the agaricus. So there are a couple things that can lead you down to edibility or non-edibility. I'm always concerned when it comes to agaricus, but some of the yellow stainers can be sickeners. Smells can also be indicative. Apparently this one was very almond smelling, which is a good smell. And sometimes if you've got some chemical or phenolic smells, you're going to want to avoid that. I'm not sure that any have killed anybody, but they sure can make you have an upset stomach, and some of them can make you puke. So just be careful. And of course, if it would have had white gills, white ring, white stipe, white cap, definitely avoid that. That's probably could be Amanita, a deadly toxic mushroom. All right, this one kind of threw me for a loop for a minute there. Daniel Berman sent this. He found this in Northern Virginia. Apparently it's growing on tulip poplar. Looking at the cap though, it's hygrophanous, meaning that as it dries out, the cap color changes color. So these darker spots are a little bit more moist, and as it dries out, it gets lighter. The cracks in the cap could indicate this is quite a brittle mushroom. And when you look at the underside, it looks like it's got some gills that are turning dark, which I suppose is darkening, maturing of the spores, turning dark. So I suggested they might be something in Satharella. Satharella tend to be brittle. They like wood, decomposing wood, and they have darker spores. Looking online, I found Homophron spadicium. I didn't know that myself, but apparently it was formerly Satharella spadicea. So that may be what this is. Another one that got me, Tim Hamilton sent this one in from Winkapin Trails. I still don't know what to call this one. Very cool mushroom. I wish I would have had some time with some books. I would have tried to look it up. I'm thinking it's probably a marasmius. So marasmius tend to have dark stipe. A lot of times they're more kind of horsehair, thicker stipes than this. These kind of widely spaced gills is pretty typical also. But I am not certain of the species. This may be a marasmus. There's a number of these other kind of.
What do you think about like a gymnopus, like semi-hertapes or spongiosis, one of those? Because it looks a little fuzzy on the base, kind of. I don't know.
These like wrinkly, like fluffy looking caps like threw me for a loop. I see some of these. We find some like that in Sequinota, but they're like more of a tan beige color, not like this. But I mean, you may be going down the right route, but I'm not certain. So you may be good there. Cool little mushrooms though. And when I have some time, I'm going to get a book and try and look through and see if I can figure them out. All right, Tim also found these, Patapsco Valley State Park. What I thought was kind of cool, I think these are some of the older version, which usually when you find this, and I'm calling this raspberry slime, Tubifera ferruginosa. At one point I thought these might be the ones that weren't as berry-like and more smooth and kind of wrinkly might be a different slime mold, but I'm not quite certain of that. Because oftentimes you'll find them and they're definitely more punctate with the, like raspberries. And these were growing nearby, so I believe that they are both the same thing. But usually you don't find, I've never really found many of the old sporulating ones like this, just these beginnings of the fruiting bodies, but that's pretty cool. It's a slime mold, not a fungi. All right, Min Lee found these. These are really cool looking. So this could probably fool you. I believe this is actually just very young, recently emerging Ganoderma. So it looks like it might, if given time, it might start turning into that brown, lacquered, orange, yellow colorations once they start shelving out. Could be buried roots or something along that. Another option could be dead man's fingers when it's young and they have, what are they? The conidiospores on them when they're very young. And I'm not sure if that's what this is. It really given time, it might show the lacquer because sometimes they'll be kind of fingery when they start coming out. But this is getting to a point where it should start showing some color if it's Ganoderma. So next on, we've got dead man's fingers. And so this is your, typically when you find dead man's fingers, it's black like this. And this is after those conidiospores, I believe is what they were, start wearing off and they turn black. This is an ascomycete. And so if you look closely, a lot of times you'll see these little dots all along it where the perithecia are, and that's where the spores are produced. I thought this one was kind of cool. It's actually almost a full hand or more there. I saw a number of the smaller version of this. There's another little one that tends to grow along roots and things in the spring. I believe it's Xylaria cornudeme or something along those lines. But anyway, this is Xylaria polymorpha, dead man's fingers. And Tim also found a nice little cluster of these guys. So that was a pretty cool little bunch right there. All right, Vicky Fraser found this in Northern Virginia. I didn't know what to tell her about this one either. Some sort of polypore. I'm not sure if it's like a Trametes or some sort of Serioporus, or it looks like it's growing unusually. It's just kind of upturned on itself. But anyway, it's definitely some sort of polypore, but I didn't know what to tell her. Feel free to chime in if anybody has any suggestions. Chris found this at Sligo Creek Park. This is, I've called this the cockleshell, aniseed cockleshell mushroom, Lentinellus cochleatus. Looking close at these gills, it looked like there was some like ragged edges forming on the gills, although I'm used to them being much more ragged in a lot of them. But anyway, that's what this looked like to me. Tim found this at Winkman Trails in Howard County. Really nice cluster there. You got some of the rings left on them. This is one of your Caprinus. And so you can see as they're getting older, they're kind of curling up. They're deliquescing and kind of getting liquidy. The spores kind of usually drip off. They have black spores. When you find them young, the gills can actually be kind of pink, like they'll go from white to pink, similar to agaricus, and then they mature to this black coloration. This isn't a shaggy mane. Shaggy manes tend to be more terrestrial instead of growing from wood. And these are more like scales instead of being all white like a shaggy mane. So these are the Cuprinopsis variegata, the scaly inky cap. Daniel found this one in Northern Virginia. First one similar to this that I found was Flamulaster erinaceus. I don't think that this was what this one is, but I know there's a number of these little tiny kind of granulose little mushrooms like this. They're really cool to find. Flamulaster usually has like some little gill remnants that are oftentimes triangular all along the edge of the margin of the cap. But this is probably Foliota granulosa. But like I said, there's a number of these little guys. And so sometimes it can be hard to put them into the right group. Tim found this at Washington Farms in Frederick, Maryland, and I'm a little bit jealous. This looks like a gross, slimy, weird looking mushroom. But when you look closer, it's actually the Rhodotus palmatus. And so they call it the wrinkly peach or the rosy vein cap. It's even got the little resin droplets on this nice fresh young one. Just such a cool looking mushroom. It's not really edible. It's just, it's just neat and it's kind of rare. I have never found it. And it looks like gets kind of funky looking once it gets older, but it's got kind of pinkish gills too. But anyway, that's just like a fun find there. Anyway, that's it for me. I threw this one on because it's gonna be another year before we see them. So anyway, thanks everybody.